as we take a look at sketching what the slope function would look like, we want to start by focusing really on like positives and negatives about slope. Because like as I look at the slope of this section of this graph, it's not clear exactly what the slope is. I mean, it looks like maybe it would be, I don't know, -1 or something like that. But we don't know because there's no numbers. But what we do know is some positive, negative, zero kind of stuff. Would this slope, can we know that it has to be negative at least?
Yes.
Yeah, because we know that it's decreasing. So we know it's going to be negative. Now I don't necessarily know how negative from this graph, but I know it's negative. Now, as I sketch the slope, then that tells me that my graph is going to be existing down here, or at least down here. Now, when it is down there, what am I looking at? Is this going to be like a curve down here? Is it going to be a line down here like that, or maybe a horizontal line? What kind of shape would we expect there? Well, yeah, it is line. Is it going to be horizontal? Yeah, because our slope is constant all the way to that vertex. And so I don't know exactly how negative, but I do know it's negative all the way to the vertex. So I drew in a horizontal line there. Okay, what happens after the vertex? What happens, that is, to the right of the vertex? We know it's positive. And again, we don't know exactly how positive it is, but we do know it's positive. So I put that above the axis there. Now, a little detail though. What is happening at the end of each of these?
Oh, it should be like one of those dotted lines.
Well, we're going to need some dots there to mark what's happening. Should these be solid dots? Should these be open dots? Should we have one of each? What are we looking at here?
Open.
Well, this is actually, it brings up an interesting aspect here. What is the slope at the vertex?
0.
I hear a lot of people saying 0. That would mean that it's going like that. But can't I also argue that, oh, well, it's going like that?
No.
It's also going like this there. In fact, there's all sorts of different kinds of tangent lines that we could draw in there to figure out what the slope actually is. And so, because there's actually multiple slope lines that we could draw there, we don't know what the slope is at the vertex. Because of that then, we're going to go ahead and draw in open dots at the end of each of those line segments. And so then that would actually be our graph of this slope function. And so notice the technique about how I'm doing it. First of all, I'm just looking at it and deciding, okay, is the slope positive or negative or 0? And then it's just going to be a matter of kind of seeing some nuances from there. That allows us to handle much more complicated graphs just by looking at it that way. So if I'm going to approach this one using the same kind of technique that I was using last time, I want to start by taking a look at where the slope is positive and negative and all that kind of stuff. So let's take a look first at this portion of the graph over here. It looks like throughout that entire section of the graph, the slope is negative. So that tells me that whatever my slope graph is, it's going to have to be residing down there in the third quadrant. The question then is, what is it? Are we again going to be looking at a horizontal line, or could it be an oblique line, or is it going to be more of a curve of some sort? Well, let's grab a couple samples and that'll tell us. Because if you're not sure, this is the way to do it. This first point, would you expect that particular slope to be close to 0 or far from 0? Close to 0. It's pretty flat, right? And so then I can know, okay, well, I'm going to sketch that one, say, kind of close to 0 over here. Okay, let's grab another point. I'm just grabbing a few sample ones. How about that one? Yeah, that looks like, it's kind of like that -1-ish kind of thing. It's negative, but it's not super huge, okay? So I'll put that one down here somewhere. But then what's happening down here? It's a negative slope. We know that. Is it close to 0 or far from 0? It'd be far from 0. We're looking at a very negative number. It might be like -10 or -100. Who knows? But it's a very negative number. So I'm going to put that one down here. It looks like we're getting a curve here. And so all we got to do is just kind of sketch in about, this is what I'm roughing it to be right now. Actually, kind of looks the same, which is interesting. Would then I expect to see this up here? No. How do we know?
Because the slope is negative.
Yeah, the slope is negative. Over in this section, the slope is still negative, so we know it's not going to be exactly the same over here. All right, well, let's start grabbing some points then. Our first point, I'll grab this one up here. Would I expect that to be close to 0 or far from 0? Far from 0, yeah, because it's a very steep slope. So it's like negative 10, negative 100, who knows? It's a very negative number. So I'm going to put it down here. And then here in the middle again, I can expect that to be kind of like this one was over here. So it's kind of a moderately negative number. Maybe negative 1, maybe not. We don't really know. So I'll just sketch that one there. And then what's going on out here? Would I expect this to be close to 0 or far from 0? Close to 0, yeah, okay. So then I might sketch it around here. And so if I take those points to rough out an idea about what that curve would look like, I end up with that as an idea about what the slope function might look like. Now this graph looks a little different. And in fact, it probably looks very different to your eye because the previous graphs were actual functions that we might see on a normal basis, ones that I would have you graph. This one, I just made it up. This is just a freehand drawn curve to show that we can use those same principles regardless of the type of curve we're seeing. So again, I'm going to look at this by breaking it down into parts. The first part I want to look at is actually this part. Do you see why I'm looking at that part specifically? Yeah. That's where the slope is positive. Because where it ends right here, I end up with a 0 slope. And so I'm kind of looking to see, okay, where is it positive? All right, now at the very start of it, the leftmost point there, well, my slope looks, let's say, moderately positive. So it's not absurdly steep or anything, but we know it's positive, so I'm just going to kind of put it up here in the middle. Again, there's no numbers on here, so everything's relative. Basically, that's my starting point, and everything else is either going to be higher or lower than that. All right. And I know, of course, here at the top, that's an important point because that's where our slope is 0. So I know that I'm going to have to plot a point at 0 down here to match up with that. So then what happens in between? Well, we don't necessarily have enough information yet. It might be straight between them, or it might be a little bit more of a curve. I want to plot a few more points to maybe come up with an idea about that. So let's take a look at the next section. So it's 0 there, and then it's negative all the way down the curve until it looks like right around here. So I'm going to sketch what that section might look like. All right, so we know it's negative. Where does it look like it's most negative? It looks like, to me, maybe like right in here, somewhere like that. That looks like it's where it's steepest. That'd be the most negative, so that's the point where I would like to put it lowest on my graph here for my slope. And I know I'm returning to 0, so I know it's going to be doing something like that. And notice all I did was grab a couple points. But already we're starting to get a little bit of a visual, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's pick up from there. So that's where I left off, there at 0. And from there, well, it just kind of keeps on being positive, doesn't it? So I know everything else is going to be a positive slope. It starts out not very positive and then kind of gets to be pretty constant, kind of a constant moderate. So it's kind of like it ends up being really pretty similar up here. So if I just see those points, and that gives me enough to have some idea about how I might sketch it. And so you could sketch the curve that goes through it. No, this one does not have to be perfect in any way. You just kind of freehand to see what it might look like. And again, the idea here is just showing the method behind this madness. So as I take a look at this one now, I again am just going to go left to right. And in this case, though, it's always a positive slope because it is increasing here and it's definitely increasing here. So all of it is going to exist up here for my final result. All right, so then let's just go left to right here for this first point. I take a look at that slope and I know it's positive. It's just a question of if it's close to 0 or if it's a big number. And it's pretty flat there, so it's close to a 0 slope. So yeah, that's a very small number. It's going to be close to 0, so I'm going to go ahead and plot that one as being fairly close to 0. I'll give myself a little bit of room to work though. All right, from there, well, this first slope, it was pretty flat. It was pretty close to 0. As I go over here, it gets maybe a little bit steeper. So at that point, say I might put it just a little bit higher. Here at 0, well, it's definitely steeper yet, so that one's going to be even higher than that. And it just keeps getting steeper, doesn't it? And so by the time I get out to this point, I have a very, very steep slope. And so I'm just going to max that out on my grid because, again, I don't have numbers to do it exactly. And so we'd end up with a graph that looks something like this. Very similar, of course, to the original, right? And that will happen. There's some graphs where they have a lot of similarities to the original function when you graph the slope function. There's some graphs where they're exactly the same. And there's some graphs where they look absolutely nothing alike. And it's a matter of just going through it piece by piece and looking at each of those slopes to kind of get your head around what it's really going to be. And the more we practice this at this point, the more instinctual a lot of the later work that we're going to be doing is going to be for you.